You're listening to CreepGeeks Podcast. So it begins again. Welcome back to the CreepGeeks Podcast, Season 7, Episode 275.
Joe Rogan AI Podcast, Space Weather, Wizard of Oz Theme Park, and our missing person cases on the rise.
Yeah. So here we are. Welcome to the CreepGeeks Podcast. We are your most favorite anomalous podcast host. I'm Greg.
I'm Omi.
Why'd you look at me like that? You're like, I probably misspelled anomalous. So as we put everything we talk about in the podcast in our show notes, if it's misspelled, it's okay.
Yeah.
Well, a little squiggly didn't come up. We're all lazy in today's society. We don't have to worry about anything. It's like you don't even know how to spell it. Just give it a stab, right?
Unless you mess it up so bad that even...
Yeah, and then it just makes fun of you. It's like it's an unrecognized word.
Or me, since I installed a second keyboard on my phone, because I'm doing Duolingo right now. It just... Oh, did you mean the Spanish word?
Like, yes, sure. Sounds great. And the next thing you know, okay.
She's being
working it.
Yeah.
All right. So anyway, welcome to the podcast. Got a lot of stuff to talk about. Glad you're here. Glad you take the time to listen if you do. And if it's your very first time tuning in, welcome. And then, like I said, if you listen, we do really, really appreciate it, especially our patrons.
Yep.
Who are super cool. We do talk about stuff we find to be interesting on the internet for a lot of things. And when we go places, we talk about those. And when we do some research and have our own experiences, we talk about those as well. Yeah. And so far, I'd like to say with these articles that we're going to talk about this news, personally, we haven't been involved in any of it. So, with that being said, totally forgot where I was going to go with this, but with that being said, hey, don't take it personal. Whatever we're talking about, don't get all worried and hurt. If we have an opinion you disagree with.
You're saying that to caveat anything you're about to say right now.
I am indeed. I am prefacing the fact that I may say something that you may or may not like. Mm-hmm. It happens. I mean, I'm in my 50s. What am I going to do? You know what the problem is? No. Change why? It's like, wait, I can't, if everybody's feelings get hurt, what am I supposed to do? You can't make everybody happy, and life's not designed that way. We've been watching a lot of reruns of, I can't really call them, reruns is an old term.
Yeah.
We've been streaming a lot of Boston Legal and like Denny Crane.
And
it's from a good time, 2008 or whatever it is. No. Like, those were the good old days, right?
That show did not age well at all.
No, it didn't.
No, there's some stuff on there where I'm like, wow, they filmed
this. Like a long time ago.
Yeah, they tried to make this funny, and now it's really, really, really
well,
cringy.
If I remember correctly, I didn't really watch it when it was on originally, but I think it was supposed to be edgy.
Yeah.
Now it's just cringy. Mm-hmm. So, speaking of cringy, what? Were you going to say something?
Great transition.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say you can call in, leave us a message if you like. We have a couple different ways for you to contact us. Our toll-free number that you can use that we should probably be exercising before the power of Google takes it away.
Yeah, that phone number, though, it's going to be 575-208-4025. That's a Roswell area code, folks.
Yes. And everything we talk about is in the show notes. So if you go to our website or anywhere you can find us, you can find all of our links and stuff in our podcast notes. So you go to creepgeeks.com. We're there.
Yeah.
And you can peruse at your leisure.
Or you can reach out to us on social media. We are pretty much on every single platform. Yeah. Just look for CreepGeeks Podcast and send us a message or... Yeah.
And if you're listening on a podcast player and you'd like to rate us, we appreciate all 5-star reviews and 3-star reviews. We do appreciate that kind of thing.
Yeah.
I was going to say it's ratings week, guys. But it doesn't really apply with podcasts.
No.
Okay, so we sort of hinted around about AI in one of our last podcast episodes, and we talked about AI and sort of kicked the idea around. And then magically, like 2-3 days later, here comes Joe Rogan with a warning.
Ooh.
Now, here's the deal. Joe Rogan, if you go back to, what was that show? The very first show he was on where I seen him on TV was News Radio.
Okay.
It was an older show for some of you youngsters, you younglings or whatever. Had Phil Hartman in it. What's his face from Kids in the Hall? Dave something. I can remember his name.
Dave Foley?
Yeah, Dave Foley. Joe Rogan. A bunch of people were in there. Andy Dick was in there.
Yeah.
It was actually a pretty good show. Came on for a little while, sort of went away. So kind of thought he was funny. Well, evidently now he's like one of the biggest podcasters in the world.
Okay.
And people love to hate on him. He's not an expert. Of course he's not. He even says he's not. He's like, don't listen to me. What do I know?
He's extremely polarizing. You either enjoy what he says, completely do not enjoy what he says, or you want to stay completely far away from those other two groups of people because you just do not want to get sucked in.
Yeah.
Yeah. I choose not to get sucked into this. So
I don't really care. I'm not so hurt by different opinions about certain things. So
yeah.
Plus, you know, the way YouTube is these days and everybody using the short platform or short content, right? It's real easy to doom scroll and run across some clips that are pretty interesting, you know.
Doesn't that say something, though, if you doom scroll and at least 10% of the content is like a Joe Rogan clip?
Yeah, well, yeah, he makes relatively long podcasts. But, I mean, you know what you got to do? You kind of got to go in there and clear some stuff out if you keep getting the same thing. Because, you know, hey, the way YouTube is these days, you'll never see anybody new.
Yeah.
Ever. Unless you, like, go in there. You almost have to go in there and fire up an anonymous browser and then go into YouTube and see what's going on, and then go back out of it and like manually search that so you can just unwreck your feed.
Yeah.
So, because I remember that was part of the joy of YouTube was seeing, we're going way back in the olden days, right? It was seeing new things that they promoted new.
Yeah.
And it wasn't necessarily the same new stuff that everybody was doing.
Yeah.
You find new content, and I was like, wow, this is great. It's not that way anymore, man. You just get spoon-fed whatever you like.
Well,
and
yeah.
even it seems like even if you just keep clicking on different things to try to wreck the algorithm so it'll give you something new, it doesn't care.
I've completely changed genres on YouTube. Like, I used to be all arts and crafts tutorials. That's what my channel was about. And now I'm more towards finding stuff in the woods and
foraging for mailbox koozies.
and rock hounding and looking for rocks and stuff. And it refuses.
Yeah, no, it won't.
It's still like, trying to give me tutorials on like crocheted mail koozies, like, no. You know?
It doesn't.
Yeah.
It doesn't care.
So
what he did was he got together with the creator or a bigwig at ChatGPT, and they created a complete podcast episode.
Oh.
Like the AI created the podcast episode. It duplicated their voices.
Yeah.
And put out a 51-minute podcast.
Yeah.
And, you know, he has a warning. He's like, hey, man, gonna watch this artificial intelligence. So after a fake version of his podcast was created 100% through AI technology. And the only real link I could find to it is from Yahoo Finance, where it says Joe Rogan just issued a warning about artificial intelligence after a fake version of his podcast was created 100% through AI technology. Here are 3 stocks to capitalize. It's in the title. You can't even get away from it. By the way, if you're not using a pop-up blocker, you should, because it's 2023, and this thing fired off blocked 13 pop-ups just trying to get to this stupid article.
Yeah.
So
that changes because the first article I found on this, he wouldn't tell you what episode or what podcast episode it was.
Right.
And now this particular article is saying it was a podcast episode around April 4th.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, it's coming out now because the whole idea is to see if you can figure it out.
Yeah.
So you can find links to it, but the idea that AI is becoming more than a trend. You've got a lot of high technology type people out there who are warning about AI, saying, turn it off. You know, we need to pay better attention to this. Turn it off. It's going crazy. To people using AI art for different things and creating AI art, there's shows out there including podcast episodes where people are trying to figure out how to have the AI just do it for them so they could just put it up and do marketing or advertising or whatever they're trying to do to get that monetized. And the only thing I see is that you can sit down there and type in some words and get some stuff going and basically make your purely fiction podcast, and you didn't have to do anything at all. Even to the point where you can pick your own voice if you want.
I would do that.
Yeah, and there's people that do that right now on YouTube because it's got, when you start to really look at it and start to have a critical eye to it, you can spot them.
Yeah.
And I hate these videos like, here are 17 things that Peter Parker and Spider-Man should have done differently. And you're like, well, let me see. And it's like AI, and you can tell. And it's like, I hate it.
Yeah.
If you get this car stereo, it's just like, I hate it. And but they're getting to where if you tweak it right, you can get a result that sounds really credible. So what we decided to do is take a little clip so that you can listen to it. And this is Joe Rogan's AI podcast, and it kind of sounds pretty good. And if this is something they can throw together really quick, imagine if you spent a ton of time doing that. So we're going to go ahead and play it and hope we don't break any real rules with this sort of thing. So don't tell us.
Train by day, Joe Rogan podcast by night, all day.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the very first episode of the Joe Rogan AI experience. I'm your host, Joe Rogan, or at least that's what this AI model thinks I sound like. Let me tell you folks, this is some next level stuff we've got going on here today. Every single word of this podcast has been generated with the help of ChatGPT, the cutting-edge AI language model developed by OpenAI. I am not the real Joe Rogan. Let me repeat it once more. I am not Joe Rogan, and the guests are not the people they portray. This is purely fiction, just for fun, so don't go around making little clips for your TikToks and make the world believe I said things I never said. Nothing in this podcast should be taken as said by the real people they portray. This is purely for entertainment purposes and an experience showcasing the amazing advancements in AI technology. So sit back, relax, and let's dive into this AI-generated world. Let's get weird, folks. It's time.
Yeah.
Okay.
I know what you're thinking.
What?
How can we do this?
I mean, how can I manipulate a certain beta experiment program that I'm enrolled in to do it?
No, I was going to make some kind of joke, but you're taking this to somewhere. You're like, how can I take this and rule the world? I'm like, no, hold on a second. I don't know. It's kind of scary if it just keeps getting better. I mean, what if it already is better? What if we really don't know and there's just like, you know what I mean?
So, okay. I have been trying to work on a book. I've been trying to write something, right?
Don't tell people what you're trying to do. You're going to give them the idea.
I'm not. However, that requires me to do additional research, including other authors and genres of fiction and stuff like that. And what I've noticed is there's certain small groups of writers in sci-fi or fantasy or what have you, and they'll sign with a certain group. And that group has an app. That app's marketing uses AI. It steals videos and then overlays sections or pieces of these authors' work over top of the video or above it in the ads.
Yeah.
So they use completely AI-generated ads.
Yeah.
And it's turned into like a mockery thing. Like we have Facebook groups devoted to it. Like, look at this cringe that this particular platform has made.
Yes.
And it gets really bad. So I, as an author, will not try to use AI in that way. There's been a long-standing thing with AI being used to create cover art and drawings and stuff like that, like illustrations for books. I've tried it, and it was horrible.
Well, imagine if you kept working it.
Yeah.
It could get pretty good.
Oh, yeah.
Yep. So technology's uncanny valley, which is what we talked about in our last podcast.
Yeah.
Is stuff like this. I don't know. I don't know. I can see people using this in a malicious way and getting into all sorts of trouble. I mean, you could really spoof people, and have, Twitter fights and all sorts of stuff, and you won't even know.
Yeah.
So, and that almost reminds me of, it was like Cat Williams and Dave Chappelle wound up getting into this big Twitter war years ago. Mm-hmm. And it went back and forth, right? Mm-hmm. And Dave Chappelle doesn't have Twitter. So it wasn't even Dave Chappelle. And basically, when he got a hold of Cat Williams, he was like, man, I'm sorry, man. I don't know what's going on. I don't have Twitter. I didn't mean to offend you or something like that. Right? And Cat Williams was like, I don't have Twitter either. So it was basically two fake Twitter people who actually grabbed the handles for Dave Chappelle and Cat Williams and were arguing back and forth. But, Chappelle was like, some of the comments and stuff that fake Chappelle would make were so good that he was amused by the whole thing. So, yeah, I don't know. I thought it was pretty funny, but yeah, it's just going to get worse. So anyway, that's probably the boring part of the podcast, but I was just sitting there thinking, if you really start to dig into it and think, how could you take AI and do stuff like this? And what could you use it for? I don't know, because it's going to get to the point, really, if you think about maybe the next 10 years of AI being able to replace any job that you'd sit behind a desk at. I mean, think about it. If you, say you're customer service, right? Maybe you're a person who does tech support or customer service. And if AI is already doing that sort of thing on the weekends through chat.
Yeah.
In some places voice, because they have to be able to, it's only a matter of time. They don't need you. They can already take, your maybe home-based job if you're doing customer service or something like that at home on the phone and ship it to India. Why not just have a computer do it?
Yeah.
So if you're raising youngsters, maybe they might need to learn a physical hands-on trade that a robot can't do.
That makes sense.
Might be some millionaire plumbers out there in the next 10 years.
Well, I mean, I used the automated chat for customer service 2 or 3 days ago because one of my orders hadn't arrived.
Yeah.
And after I kept restating the same complaint a few times, it gave up and gave me a refund.
Yeah, so, that's good. That's what you want to do.
Basically, I restated my complaint and changed 2 words in each sentence, and finally it was like, I'll give you a refund.
I was doing it for something. I can't even remember what it was now.
So.
It wasn't Amazon.
Mine was. So.
No, but I'm trying to think what I did. I knew it was well done, but it was definitely AI. It's like, you really there working at 9 o'clock on a Sunday? Yeah, I don't think so. All right. So, space weather is evidently a thing, and we got somebody who was listening to our podcast say, hey, you guys should talk a little bit about space weather.
Yeah.
And it's pretty deep, man. It's a subject that there's a lot of stuff going on, right? Mm-hmm. And so what I thought I would do is try to talk about it in a way that my limited understanding, why March is wild for space weather, right? Because I typed in space weather and it came up with space hurricane. And I'm like, what? And this is going to piggyback into something else we're going to talk about in just a minute. But the idea that, space, the sun, all sorts of things that can happen can directly influence the earth is just kind of like, okay, I think we really think in a lot of cases that we're insulated by distance and all that sort of thing, and that things really can't do it. Everybody knows about like CMEs, which are coronal mass ejections, right? Where the sun will basically send out like a bloop, and then radiation comes and it can knock out cell phones and satellites and things like that.
Yeah.
But the idea that you can have like hurricanes and weird stuff like that in space is kind of crazy, right? So evidently space weather is hard to predict, right? But scientists know that Earth's spring season coincides with increased solar activity, which can, definitely affect our day-to-day. Solar flare-ups, coronal mass injections. But this website Inverse talked to space weather experts on how our host star causes geomagnetic storms and the ramifications of life on Earth. So since the sun fuels our very existence on Earth, its behavior as a star can also be destructive, and periodically it sends out flares of boiling hot plasma into space, and Earth can get in the way. And these flares are the culprit, and basically it may be behind many space weather events.
Yeah.
And one of the prettiest ones is the Aurora Borealis.
Yeah.
Where you're just getting bombarded.
And it was supposed to be visible last month all the way here to like North Carolina and some other states, and
I didn't really see it.
Well, we were having horrible weather, so I was like,
oh, that's probably right.
And then like some few people that I know who like live in Black Mountain or Swannanoa and bothered to drive like the Blue Ridge Parkway, a few of them were able to catch it because they were like above the mountains and stuff, you know.
High-speed solar winds, solar flares, coronal mass ejections, hurricanes are occurring like on the surface of the planets and stuff like that. Yeah. And if you look at like, what is it? How do you pronounce it? Umamu.
I think.
People were like, "How is this thing? It's changing course. What is it doing?" And they're like, "Well, maybe plasma in the sun is heating up ice and it's causing these little micro jets and turning it and all this other stuff." And it's like, I don't know. I try not to think about stuff like that, right? So, I mean, because the sun's been around since forever, and it's what actually keeps us alive. But the idea that this thing can shoot out boiling hot plasma, flinging ionized material and radiation out into outer space, and sometimes our planet gets in the way, is kind of crazy. You know, that's kind of a theory for the moon, right? Mm-hmm. Is that the moon is of the perfect size to block the sun, and that the moon can basically shield us from stuff that happens from the sun. Yeah, I don't know how you steer it or whatever, or how it can get in the way, but it's like supposed to have some ratio that makes it the correct size to block out the sun, which is what you see when you have eclipses and things like that, and should shield the Earth from weird stuff that happens, possibly from the sun. The moon's a weird thing. It ain't what everybody thinks it is, and the idea of another planet the size of like Mars or Jupiter or whatever it was smashing into the Earth and balling out a large scoop of Earth and it magically forming into a sphere that just happens to protect us amongst other things up in the sky, I think is ludicrous. I like the idea that it was dragged into place from a war between two cosmic brothers. It's kind of weird. But yeah, space weather, man, it's just kind of, when you start to look at like some of the order of magnitudes of these coronal mass ejections and what they can do to just all of our like communications and electronic interference and things like that, with the electromagnetic interference that it can cause, and the idea that the poles can slip and flip and cause all these terrible things, I'm like, man, I don't want to dig too much into it, right? These magnetic storms, they affect all sorts of crap, like the power grid, satellites, other spacecraft, astronauts, if they're out there hanging out. And the sun, as the sun rotates approximately every 27 days on average, right, the coronal holes, as they come around, can basically eject this high-speed wind stream that can affect Earth. And I'm like, all right, I'm done. But there is some pretty cool pictures and video on this website. We have a link to it. It's at inverse.com. And you're trying to get an idea what causes extreme space weather. I mean, it can get kind of weird. Yeah, I didn't particularly care.
And then there's all these little side parts to it about, you know, lessons learned by Starlink and satellites. And like
and because our Starlink was just completely gone for a period
a
couple weeks ago, and we're like, what? And then, you know, of course, what was Omi's response? Did you pay the bill? And I'm like, yeah, it's not even due yet. Let me get on the internet to see. And I couldn't, and I started trying to really think, did it get paid or not? And I'm like, is it on? I think it's auto pay because I don't remember actually when to do. I'm like, I think it's due on the 15th. And
see, part of that
it was really due on the 22nd. We had already paid it. So
is that I have noticed every year now that I've gotten older, every year it's not the beginning of the year. It's always like 2-3 months in that a lot of your auto pay stuff, like I'm not saying you, I'm saying the world in general, me, a friend of mine. Your auto pay stuff always acts up.
Yeah.
Like within the first 2 or 3 months of the new year. And that's when you got to sit down and go, oh, God, and figure out all your passwords and enter your...
Hey, would you like to pay your mortgage 3 times?
Yeah, pretty much.
And then you're like, surprise! And they're like, oh, okay.
So...
Well, we're going to go ahead and take the fees. And it's like, yeah.
Yeah.
Please do. Yeah, man. So Starlink went down because of this weather. Yep. Because of the thermosphere. It's like, atmospheric drag in the thermosphere. Thicker atmosphere that heats up. So the atmosphere thickened enough that it affected the newly launched Starlink stations that basically had experience of atmospheric drag, which caused them to deorbit and burn on the way down for some of these satellites. So you remember how people were like, what is that in the sky? That was my bill going up because some of these freaking satellites just getting burned up. I'm like, oh, this is not good. That explains why my speed's not. Our speed with Starlink is not fast and wasn't fast.
We should use that as a comment next time somebody posts some UAP footage. Like, what is that in the sky?
That's my Starlink bill. It's going up. Yeah. So, okay, so some of these, because our speed, okay, our average speed really hasn't been very fast, like 15 megabits, you know.
Yeah.
That's not fast, but it's super fast when you had HughesNet. And, you know, HughesNet's like, oh, you want some internet? Are you rural? We've got a solution for you. Here's 2 megabits. Yeah. Don't use it all in one place, though. We're not going to basically take your data away. We're going to slow it down to less than 2 megabits, and you can't use it.
Yeah.
Think of all the money you'll save. It's just like, man, I hate it. I hate it. Anyway, but now we're down to like 7 or 6.
Yeah.
So I'm like, you know, I wasn't complaining about 15. 15's like, you know, I'll life in the slow lane, 15 megs. You know, even slower.
This brought up a whole conversation at work today about there's some sort of new law going into effect or proposed thing going into effect in North Carolina where more and more credit unions are closing in North Carolina, as well as certain types of banks. And they're closing up because they're expanding their online options. And many politicians are going in saying, that's not a valid option for rural residents. And a majority of North Carolina is rural.
They don't care. Yeah. You know who else doesn't care? Internet creators in general do not care about rural internet. They're like, it used to be you had to create, and I've said this before, like if you made a website, you'd make like a low broadband or low bandwidth version of that website to help out people that had like slow dial-up. They don't even give a crap anymore. They're like, what's up?
Yeah.
You want me to send you a login, a verification code to your phone? Yeah. Here we go. I sent it, and I see it the next day.
Yeah.
You got 30 seconds to put this code in.
Because trying to explain to these people that you're so rural that your internet and your phone service are most likely both satellite and on the same bill, or it does not. No,
they don't get it.
Yeah.
They're like, well, it's fine. It's like, you got 5G, dude. Of course it's fine.
And trying to explain that to these politicians in specific with like these banks and like, you know, offering more internet, it's just rolling right over their heads.
Yeah, It's the same thing like when, does TikTok connect to Wi-Fi? It's like, dude, there's so many things wrong with that question. It's terrible. But anyway, man, space weather. If you really want to dig into it, go ahead, man. It's
okay.
Yeah. In the comic books, if you get exposed to some crazy like space radiation and stuff, you can turn into a Fantastic Four. In real life, you can just basically all your stuff doesn't work and you can eventually die. You won't even know. Man, let me jump on here and figure out why everything's not well. Can't do it. That's like when you used to have to call in when your internet went down. Experiencing internet issues? Please go to www. And it's just like, you son of a bitch. If I could do that, I wouldn't have to.
Or even further back, experiencing internet issues. Call.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So. Like, yeah, thanks, VoIP. Mm-hmm. That's tragedy. It is a tragedy. So the Wizard of Oz theme park is going to reopen. I didn't know this was a thing. We talked about it a couple of years ago.
Yeah, and we had a couple of listeners who were very passionate about it.
Yeah, they're like, you should totally go.
And then we had some who were like, you should totally not go.
Yeah, and it doesn't matter anyway. I'm not a Wizard of Oz type person, and if it didn't cost $55 to go in to basically the theme park, which is not really, it sort of fell by the wayside, but they opened up a part of it or whatever. For like a festival, kind of a thing, you know, so you can go and celebrate the Wizard of Oz. The whole park's not open. I don't know if there's any like roller coasters or anything weird like that. Or not weird, but anything cool like that, you know. So evidently September 23rd or September 2023 on the 8th through the 10th and the 15th and 17th and the 22nd and 24th, I guess those are weekends.
Yeah.
General admission tickets, $55. Children under 2 are free. You can buy your tickets and go to this Wizard of Oz theme park. It's in Beach Mountain, North Carolina, which I'm not going. I don't really know where it is, but it says, that's right. Just travel over the rainbow to find yourself in one of the world's largest wonderful Wizard of Oz events at the Land of Oz. No matter if you're a kid or adult, there's a land of fantasy and magic. I'm like, it's kind of weird, right?
Yeah.
But, I mean, people are super excited about it, and evidently you can go, and you get people dressed up like the Wizard of Oz characters and celebrating, and, you know, it's like in the woods on a mountain kind of thing. So you're like in this weird sort of place to begin with.
It's a weird place, and it it fell into disrepair sometime during the 80s, like you were saying, the late 80s, but it would still get used maybe once a year. We've talked about it because somehow it landed on websites like Atlas Obscura and Roadside America because it was just creepy.
Yeah, and it's kind of part of our weird news because I'm like, that's pretty weird.
And if you went there when they weren't holding celebrations, it was just an unusual place to go.
Yeah.
So now apparently they're reinvigorating it and they're trying to invest in it a little bit.
Yeah.
So
if you want to get married, and you want to go to a unique place and get married, somebody right now is like, shut up. Right? And you can go to the Wizard of Oz, Land of Oz. It's the Wizard of Oz Festival, so you can check that out if you want.
You know,
it's still just kind of weird. It's just weird the way you have sort of that urban decay or urban exploration where you have like things that are just dilapidated and falling apart.
Yeah,
and this is mixed with some good stuff, and you can't go through the whole park. It's like it's just kind of a strange thing.
Somebody corrected me the other day because I use urbex as like a hashtag or a tag on a lot of my stuff. Urban exploration.
Yeah.
Apparently, it's Rurex. So yeah, I know, which I thought at one point was Russian exploration since they have all sorts of crazy stuff in Russia, but no, it's rural exploration.
Well, back in the olden days, it really was just urbex, and then you did it, and then the rural people got all worked up over it again.
So it was a creepy place if you went when nobody was there, but now they have a functioning website, so things are changing.
Yeah. It's, you get the yellow brick road, and you can do all that stuff.
Are they going to hire people to, I don't know how to.
No, there's such a following with this sort of thing all over the world. They probably got volunteers. There's just like straight up, yeah, I'll be there.
I talked to a woman who's going to vend at some of these events here, and she's like, "You guys might fit in, maybe not." And I'm like, "What is that supposed to mean?" She's like, "Well, you talk about ghosts and UFOs and weird stuff." I'm like, "I'm sorry, Wizard of Oz is one of the weirdest movies ever in like popular American culture. How can you?" Yeah. So maybe we should get like a table and vend it one of the days.
I don't think you can. First off,
she's doing it.
Well,
so,
okay.
Yeah.
Well, good for her. If she thinks that we're weird, okay. So you have weird stuff that we talk about, and people will be like, "Oh, that's just kind of weird." Then you have this sort of weird subset where it's like almost like for me, Uncanny Valley type stuff.
Yeah.
Like adult Disney fans. And then you got Wizard of Oz folks just kind of like,
I mean, there's a large part of Wizard of Oz that is just uncanny to me.
Yeah, well, yeah. I would rather not drag a table and go to Beach Mountain and try to sell Bigfoot stickers. Do you have anything that's Wizard of Oz related?
Nope.
It's like, no, thank you.
Nope.
I do not. And somebody's going to say, if you start the, Pink Floyd's Dark Side of the Moon and hit the right time, it's like, yeah, I know.
Yeah.
Everybody knows that, Frank. Right? Yeah. So speaking of New Mexico homeless people possibly going missing.
Would you stop?
So when you sent this, did you send this to me? I think you did. No,
Yeah.
I put it in here.
No,
you sent me another one. Was it you?
No, I sent you this, but you put it in there. So
all right. So it was collaborative from
Yes.
your anomalous broadcast and podcast host.
This article came out a couple of weeks ago, but it's still something that's been in the conversation over the past couple of weeks, and it's the fact that in certain areas, and Albuquerque is one of them, there's been a report in the rise of missing persons. Now, in this particular article, the missing persons happen to be part of the homeless population. And the nonprofits involved, these are nonprofits that do a lot of outreach to the very large homeless population that's present in New Mexico. Now, when you work for a nonprofit or some sort of charity or service-oriented organization, when you interact with the homeless population or people with mental health concerns, you kind of keep track of people. You kind of have to. It helps you establish rapport in the community, helps you keep safe by interacting with them on a regular basis.
Well, and it also proves that there's an actual need, so you can keep the money coming because
that's true. Yeah,
it's basically documenting the return on investment.
True. I mean, if you make this outreach and you make improvements in the homeless population, you help people not be homeless or improve their situation, that's the return on investment. The problem is some of these people, they're disappearing, and the nonprofits believe it's part of some sort of scam.
Yeah.
So
it's not funny, but it is kind of funny.
I mean, which is terrifying because you hear like scare tactic headlines like this in the news like every couple of years, like people are disappearing and it's a giant underground network.
Until we do something, this is going to keep happening.
Yeah.
And our indigenous people are going to keep going missing from the streets. Well, so as I was reading this,
yeah, I
was doing thinking like you were thinking, and it's even in its own way more nefarious. So
yeah.
White vans pull up, and they offer riches. Hey, go to Arizona.
Well, so they start a conversation with these people offering to give them health care and temporary housing and signing up for some sort of native or indigenous health insurance and also get them food stamps.
Right.
Well, it's a whole scam because the so-called rehab or temporary housing doesn't even exist, or if it is a real building, they do not have a program set up like that. So these people just basically they get picked up. Any resources like the money that they're given for gas or whatever are used towards this trip.
And then any money that they would get being part of this program goes to the people that took them and not to the people that actually need it.
Yeah.
It's pretty nefarious.
It's awful, and I can't...
Once in Arizona, the people were made to sign up for a specific type of insurance, right? The native health insurance.
Yeah.
And then they get kicked out and stranded in Arizona.
Yeah.
So that's not cool.
No,
And evidently it works because there's a whole bunch of them just disappeared out of New Mexico.
I did a little bit of extra research on this, and they copied the scheme from some habits that they learned in Quartzsite.
Yeah.
Where Quartzsite would have a program for indigenous, or not indigenous, but
elderly, older peoples,
older people and high risk people.
Let's get your Medicare and your Medicaid, and you can get $300.
Yeah, and they had programs where they taught people how to do that, but it was genuine.
Yeah,
allegedly. Now they picked up that and they turned it into a scam, and now they're dropping people off not just in Arizona, but they're dropping them off right past the Texas border. I mean, it's bad.
Yes.
But just overall, that's a terrifying headline. The whole, suddenly there's this specific group of people missing. And I found that something similar, well, not kind of similar.
Be honest, you were thinking serial killer.
No, I was thinking something.
That's what I was thinking.
So back in August of last year, there was allegedly an increase in missing girls in Antioch, California. It turned out it wasn't necessarily an actual increase in cases. It was just increased news coverage. And people were getting confused because suddenly, wow, I've just listened to 6 different missing persons reports.
Yeah.
No, you watched 3 different news channels and heard 2 different missing persons news reports. I took that and I took it over to an article from West Virginia at the end of last year, beginning of this year. West Virginia claims that over the past few weeks, they've had several missing persons cases and investigations by law enforcement in Beckley, West Virginia. So they're saying, common reason for people to go missing is difficult issue, which has been proven tough to fix. Anything ranging from missing juveniles to missing homeless folks, stuff like that, and they're having a hard time tracking them down. So
Yes.
They didn't go so far as to expose some sort of nefarious scheme, but currently there's over 20 people missing in southern West Virginia and close to 120 missing in the whole state.
It seems like that might be a little bit higher.
Well, North Carolina just recently updated the missing persons database for the state, and they're claiming there's 35 active missing persons cases just for the county we live in. Now, the county that Asheville's in has over 135. Yeah.
That's a lot.
And going to places like Cherokee County, I couldn't even get an accurate number because it's split up so much.
Oh, well, you're not going to because it's also a huge tourist area. It kind of goes back to what we were saying before. When you look at the Great Smoky Mountains National Park and the whole area, it's the most visited national park ever, which Cherokee borders that. It's right there as well. You're not going to get accurate numbers there because why would you want to put that press to it?
Because, and part of the Qualla boundary, which is the indigenous Cherokee area that's been designated, depending on what side of the river it's on, determines how it gets reported. And we were tracking that because at the end of last year, one of our Patreon supporters was giving me some leads on some strange stuff in the national forest areas around.
Yeah, he's keeping an eye on it.
Yeah. But
like shutting down entire large boundaries of land and like what's going on, bear attacks, but doesn't make sense. But.
Yeah, and I was paying attention to bodies being found because we had this really weird report at the beginning of the year about this woman's body just suddenly being found kind of outside Maggie Valley area.
Yeah.
And then the next thing we know, there's just like a month of silence, and suddenly her singular death has 5 suspects. Yeah.
Something's going on, man.
And then this article that we have in the show notes for this podcast episode, there's a body in a river identified as a missing Robeson County man. So that now totals 3 bodies found in or near bodies of water in that specific area.
Let's just say it for what it is. There's 3 reported.
Yeah. Because that's the other thing. There were some cases last year that were seemingly happening every 2 months or over the summertime, but not getting reported until much later. So 3 bodies, though, within, a month and a half for me that I've found in this area.
Yep.
That's kind of creepy. It makes me think something else is going on that's not being reported about. So it does tie into tragedies by the water. Yeah.
It ties into strategies, everybody.
Strategies, yeah.
Some strategies.
But, the fact that I counted out 3, I was like, why is this like putting something in my ear, And I'm like,
because we've been here long enough all of a sudden to know that things seem kind of odd in certain areas. And we talked about, everything has been sort of weird, but just from missing stuff in general.
Well, that and
to the idea of feral people to just...
Earlier this week, somebody told me, because I was talking about like bad news happening to people, and someone said, well, things happen in 3.
Yeah, well, yeah.
And that gets said in general here in the South. Well, bad things happen in 3.
Well, it's everywhere.
Yeah. I hear it more here.
Okay, all right.
So, bad things happen in 3, and I keep hearing that being told over and over. Well, I did research, and it turns out that it's linked to water. Specifically, in the early 1900s, there was something called the Waterways Journal, and it was a journal for steamboats and people who traveled by way of ferry and steamboat in America. Now, they came out with an article in the early 1900s about these horrible tragedies that happened, and the article title actually involved a 3rd one coming soon, pretty much. And it was like, as we know, things happen in 3s, and that's the earliest reference of it.
Yeah, Fridays was always considered a day of bad luck.
Yeah.
And while boatmen had no Sunday, it was always considered of importance to look out for breakers ahead on Friday. They have all sorts of weird stuff in here, right?
Yeah.
And it said that Friday was always considered bad luck, right? Because there was no Sunday, and it was always considered of importance to look for breakers ahead on Friday. And there was all the proof in the world a certain boat had begun making its trip on Friday.
Yeah.
Right. Launched on Friday, started out on Friday, sunk on Friday. And it's like, why? Why are they putting that in there? And I guess what they're trying to say is that Friday is a day where people relax.
Yeah.
But
and I've heard of like this old folklore thing where it was bad to launch like a fishing trip on a Friday.
Yeah.
If not like, having fun fishing trip, but if you were like a commercial fisherman, it was bad luck to do it on a Friday. But this article, it found like where I came upon that happens in 3 thing. This says, one of the most cited superstitions was the belief steamboat accidents came in sets of 3. The October 22nd, 1892 Waterways Journal reported a steamboat accident. There is likely to again be a verification of the 3 theory. The Robert Jenkins burned a few days ago. Rowboat Jenkins burned a few days ago and was soon followed by the Bel Air. What will be next? So that's
there's a lot of like river
or
riverman lore or boatman lore. One of them is that when the rats leave, then you should too.
Yeah.
Which kind of makes sense, It's just like here they put a little clipping of an article that says rats left steamer and then it sank.
Yeah.
So it's like, But, all those superstitions and stuff that people have throughout time, they all sort of change and we all wind up having different ones. But I can see how important they'd be back in the olden days. If anything, the superstition does a good job of keeping you alert.
Yeah.
Like, don't go underneath that ladder. That's bad luck. Yeah, especially if it falls on you, right? Yeah. I don't know. It's kind of crazy. But, if you look at the water lore in general, I mean, going back through just everything, right? We got like native lore and just lore in general. Bad stuff happens by the waters.
Yeah.
Little people, water nymphs, all sorts of just weird stuff. And plus, you can also fall in the river or lake or whatever doesn't die.
That was what I was trying to remember. And I was trying to remember whether I read it in like a novel or if I actually read like a folklore thing about little people and bodies. Like
we talked about it in the podcast like 3 or 4 times.
If you pass away near water, like almost like a changeling type situation can happen.
Yeah.
So, and I couldn't remember where I found the source for that. So,
I don't know. It's tied into native lore.
It's also tied into
Lakota. No, I can't remember, but yeah.
It's also tied into like a French lore, like folklore as well.
Well, it's also tied into the fairy fae folk stuff in Europe and everywhere else too. Got to watch the water or pull you in. So water nymphs and spirits and sprites and things like that. See, like all the fae folk and fairy folk, people are like, oh, they're so fantastical and fantasy and mystical, and all of them are mean. Right? And it kind of goes like with Bigfoot, right? Everybody's like, oh, Bigfoot's like Harry and the Hendersons. I don't think so. I think if there's a Sasquatch, it's an animal. And it has animalistic tendencies. Do stuff like, beat your arm off. Rip it off and beat you with it kind of a thing. What? It's true? Like hunters' bodies, stuff. See, that'd be the thing is to talk to or find a ranger that would talk about some of just the horrible, gory stuff they've seen in some of these national parks and stuff like that. Like, hunters' body stuffed 25 feet up in a tree, ripped in half, whatever. And it's, it's just mountain lions. Like, is it though? Maybe not. Maybe it's Bigfoot. Never know. Could be aliens. Probably not. Yeah, I don't know. That was kind of weird. So we put a couple different things in there. The missing people went from being a serial killer thing for me to, hey, get in this white van. We're going to get you some benefits and stuff and, take care of you, which, hey, it sounds great, right?
Yeah.
You signed up for it, and then they kick them to the curb and take their benefits. That's terrible.
Yeah.
Happens to old people every year.
But that's...
Not the getting taken away part, but like the scams, man. Yeah. It's scam time.
And I went down this whole rabbit hole of, oh my goodness, missing people are on the rise again. It's starting all over. Only to find, no, it's just...
Dirt bags.
It's dirt bags. It's more awareness of missing people and being hard to track. I mean, West Virginia and Western North Carolina are very rural areas. It's hard to track where people go when they disappear. So
it's true.
Yeah.
One of the things I was going to say and forgot was the average life expectancy of a steamboat was 5 years.
Yeah.
That's not long, man.
No.
That's not long. That's crazy. Well, anyway, at this point in the podcast, or part of the podcast, I should tell you that we're done. So we normally do a little over an hour, and this one's about 50 minutes, and 50 minutes is good.
So thank you guys for tuning in. Please check the show notes if anything we talked about was interesting to you. Also in the show notes are links to our Patreon if you are interested in supporting the show. We also have an Etsy shop where I'm slowly relisting and updating with some new CreepGeeks stuff. Keep an eye out on that stuff over the next couple weeks. Or check us out on social media. We are trying to grow our Facebook group as well as our TikTok.
Yes.
Yeah.
So anyway, there you go. Spring is here. Allergies are kicking around. The yellow stuff is flowing.
It's awful.
Yeah, it is terrible. It is what it is, though. We'll see how it plays out.
Yeah.
Spring. It's great.
No,
It's like, hey, get your car keys, your cell phone, and your Claritin, right? And head on out the door.
I almost had it out without getting my Claritin today.
It'd been bad.
Oh, yeah.
Sneezed 1,000 times.
So.
People look at least, maybe a year or two outside of COVID, people will stop looking at you all crazy if you start sneezing.
Yeah.
So, when not long ago you sneeze, people start running from you. So there you go. Anyway, I do appreciate you taking time to listen. So see you later. Take it easy. Bye-bye.
Bye.